Chapter 2, Inherit. While the Valiant Federation had just celebrated their newest graduating class, it didn't stop them from training the next. Another obligation that came with Enos's agreement with the heroes was that she had to improve their combat classes. About 6 young adults stood on the edge of a foam mat, toes grazing the leathery plastic that wrapped around it. Their ages seemed to vary from being barely 18 to around Enos's age. The tall girl on the very far left swayed slightly, eyes trained on the mat while the boy next to her scanned the room. Before Enos could study them further, the doors to the training room slammed open to reveal Roth and Nathan, along with a few other heroes. While the new students straightened to attention, Enos relaxed her shoulders and fell into the background. Nathan shot her a small smile as they stood shoulder to shoulder, just barely brushing against the other. Today will be like your usual training, except we have a few guests joining us, Roth began, gesturing to the duo behind him. A girl with buzzed hair in the middle crossed her jewelry-laced arms, eyes meeting Enos's like a challenge. The two boys to her left seemed to be sizing her up, obviously having egos to match that of the sons. Their lips quirked up as she met their eyes, but quickly diminished as she turned her attention to the last kid in line, small and picking at the skin around his fingernails. He was too busy studying the wood-grain floor to see Enos. "My name is Nathan Cuddy, but you probably know me as Nexus. This here is the Eagle, or Enos Wake," he introduced with an air of casualty. The students remained silent, waiting for further instruction from either of them. "I spent the morning warming up. This training session is just a test run to see what we should and shouldn't implement into our curriculum," Roth chimed in, stepping to the side of the room to observe. A few other heroes joined his spectating, notably Nightshade, who was from the nature track. "Do you want to take the lead now, or wait to see what we're working with?" Nathan asked her mentally. Mulling it over, she paced closer to the mat, pointing to one of the boys who were laughing and the girl with the buzzed hair. "You two, on the mat," she commanded in a quiet voice. While her voice lacked volume, it didn't lose any power. Huffing, the girl took her place sharply, looking the taller boy up and down. Instead of collecting himself, he shot one last hushed joke to his friend before standing on the opposite end of the mat. "We typically match students based on their track," Nightshade chimed in, head tilting and brows furrowed as she looked between Enos and Roth. "Will your opponent out in the city declare to you what abilities or weapons they have?" she shot back. Neither hero had a response as Enos turned her attention to the two students. "What usually ends a sparring match here?" she asked Nathan. "We typically do best of 3 that goes until someone yields or we call it off, and it goes too far. But if you want, we can just do one match and base it off of that," came his reply. Nodding once, she relayed the new rules to the students and motioned for them to prepare. Nathan leaned close to her, showing off the two students' files, Gunner of the strength track and Isla of the material track. An interesting fight, to say the least. Counting them down, Gunner made the first move to throw a punch, which was easily dodged by Isla. She was quick on her feet, standing on her tiptoes as she spun around to be behind his back. Her kick was easily caught, but that didn't stop her from trying to bring her other leg around, becoming airborne for a moment. Failing to find her target, she rolled out of the attack and prowled at the edge of the mat, thinking. "Come on, Isla, I haven't got all day," Gunner quipped, throwing another momentous punch in her direction. She dodged with a huff, throwing her own 3 in rapid succession. Both still stood, so the fight continued. "If it's such an easy fight, why haven't you won yet?" Isla threw back, reaching for a metal necklace around her throat. Before she could use her ability on it, Gunner had ripped it out of her hands, sending it sprawling out of bounds. Spitting some curses, Isla dove out of his reach as he planted his feet once more. He threw one more solid punch, barely missing Isla's tiny frame. Rolling beneath his extended arm, she removed one of her metal bracelets and wrapped the chain around her knuckles. In a moment, the material seemed to become almost liquefied, molding to the skin in a rough form of brass knuckles. Pivoting sharply, the new-formed weapon connected under Gunner's jaw, sending him sprawling to the floor, his arms laying just out of bounds. "And that's match," Nathan said, scattered polite applause littering the room. Enos was not one of them, watching the two students and assessing. She knew her main point in the change, and one that she had been set on since her recent alliance, but today proved its importance. "Should we let the others have a go, or should I make my point now?" Enos asked Nathan, still looking over to the students in their files. "Let them go ahead. Practice is practice. Plus, there's still a chance one of them will surprise you," was all she got in response as he turned and called up the next two students. the shy girl from the far left, and the other boy who was joking around. Daisy, from the prism track, specialized in the art of absorbing light, wielding shadows. She'd be fighting against Aaron, of the poison track. There were no special notes for him, but that promised nothing. The spar was kept relatively short. Aaron, like Gunnar, made the first punch. It fell short, a navy black sludge releasing from his pores. In return, Daisy called upon her power, removing the light between them to build a wall. She flexed her fingers in hesitation, which allowed for Aaron to use his toxins in offense. Daisy hissed in pain as it made contact with her right hand. Instead of yielding, she pushed through a shadow wall and called on her abilities once more to remove the light around his eyes, clouding his vision. She got a few good hits in before once again recoiling in pain as she made contact with the toxic sludge, stepping out of bounds. "That's a match for Mr. Beddoe," Nathan declared as the two walked off the mat. Enos had to refrain from herself from rolling her eyes as the two jocks began to celebrate their one win as Nightshade volunteered to take Daisy to the medics. "This last matchup should be interesting," Roth chimed in from the sidelines. Barely sparing him a glance, she accepted the last two files from Nathan. One was for the boy who didn't look up at Enos in the beginning, Hugo from the cinder track. His opponent was the observant young boy next to Daisy named Kaz from the perception track, the same one Enos fell into. "I bet Roth is having a field day with this matchup," Enos thought as she handed the files back to Nathan. He breathed out a laugh as he set the papers down, intentionally brushing his shoulder against hers. What Roth is leaving out is that Kaz is a testing student for new classes in the future. He was a vigilante in the moors that they convinced to be a part of a trial run in the academy, Nathan told her mentally. Humming in acknowledgement, she met Roth's eyes as he smiled. "What I wouldn't give for him to be humbled," she thought quietly, keeping her expression neutral as she looked away. "Little do you know he's thinking the very same thing about you," Nathan relayed with a smile. The two watched as Kaz removed something from his ears. Earplugs. The students were counted in like usual, and it was clear to see that the energy between the two of them was different than the previous fights. For the other students, it felt like watching a script, like every move was planned out as a dance rather than a battle. Not with Kaz and Hugo, who didn't lunge for each other at the beginning match. They circled around each other, scanning. It was Hugo who made the first lunge, fist on fire and aimed straight for Kaz's chest. He easily dodged the attempted hit, kicking the back of Hugo's leg as he pranced to the other side of the mat. Hugo, now on his knee, rolled out from the vulnerable position and threw a fireball behind him. It charred the athletic shirt that Kaz was wearing, but it didn't discourage him. The two met in the center of the mat, neither holding back now. Kaz managed to twist one of Hugo's arms behind his back, leaving his ability momentarily useless. He managed to kick out a leg, connecting with Kaz's knee, which sent them both tumbling. Neither of them wait long before jumping back to a flurry of punches. The spar easily doubled the time the others took, leaving the two students panting and sweating. In a final attempt for victory, Hugo swung his flaming arm at Kaz's left ear, a quiet sizzling sound in its wake. He shouted out in pain, not only from the burns, but the sound as well. "That's enough," Enos called, stepping closer to the mat. Neither boy listened, continuing their war with one another. Kaz had managed to knock one of Hugo's teeth, blood dripping from his knuckles. He smiled, once again going in and trying to knock at another. "The match is over," Roth commanded with a shout, also coming closer to the two boys. He also went ignored as Hugo once again shot a fireball, and barely missed landing it squarely into his opponent's chest. And just as quickly as it started, it ended with both boys freezing in a jagged way and clutching their heads. "That's match," Nathan practically hissed, eyes glowing an eerie green as his ability slowly wore off from the two of them, allowing them to move freely once again. It was a terrifying reminder that Nexus was not here for show, but a hero to be both respected and feared. Isla offered to take Kaz to the infirmary, as he all but collapsed once Nexus's hold dissipated. Gunnar and Aaron offered the same for Hugo, both groups ushered out of the room and leaving the adults to discuss what had just happened. "They need more hand-to-hand," Enos spoke, not looking over to her fellow mentors. With a barely concealed scoff, Roth crossed his arms and looked over to her. "They need discipline. This was demonstration that those with lack of rules and guidance are dangerous." "Hero or not, it's the powers that were the issue here," she retorted, already feeling the rage at his incompetence rise. Roth opened his mouth to retaliate before Nathan could physically put his body between them, arms raised as if to keep them separated. I agree with Roth that there are going to need to be punishments on both ends for continuing the fight after it's called off. But Enos does have a point. They're so reliant on their abilities that it makes them a liability. There are too many situations where they'll need more than that, and they won't be ready, he reasoned. In the depth of her mind, she could feel Nathan waiting to grab control if she chose to lunge. She's confident that Roth must be feeling it too, in the way he scrubbed his hands over his face. The whole purpose of the academy is to allow young students to perfect their powers. Going into the field of heroism is their choice, and out of control training-wise, Roth explained, grabbing the students' folders from where they rested on a bench. And statistics have shown that more than double the amount of students go into the field after graduation since the Federation was established, Enos shot back, arms crossed and leaning towards Nathan. A lot has changed since the 1920s when referring to those with abilities. An influx of them came forward after dealing with chemicals they didn't know a thing about. There were a few individuals who took initiative to comfort those with the newfound abilities that society had frowned upon, forming the beginnings of what would be known as the Federation. Its original purpose was to establish a support group to discover others with abilities from those chemicals and materials. While it functioned that way for a long time, a new group of teams came up with the idea to evolve the Federation. Eric Roth, often considered the ringleader of that change. His friends and him reformed the support group into the modern-day Valiant Federation, developing the Academy and power tracks as a way to connect the hated superpowered population to the public, and help confused kids understand what they could do. Superheroes didn't emerge until much later, and it was unknown whether they started at the Federation or not. It started with a small group of graduates from the Academy, 2 or 3 a year, but like anything else, it grows in popularity. Nowadays, it was almost a guarantee that if a student attends the Federation's academy, they will go into the hero field. "Let's spar," Enos offered, not looking down from Roth's stare. He didn't reply for a moment, holding her stare with the same intensity. She had to take a step forward to challenge him, but her feet were rooted to the ground. It was a feeling she hadn't known well, but Nathan's unmistakable hold to her mind was something she couldn't forget. He didn't do it often, but losing control over your body was easily remembered. "You're going to get yourself killed," he mentally told her, his anxiety creeping into her own mindset. Instead of replying in their usual banter, she gave a cerebral tug to the leg muscles. He still didn't relent as he turned his attention to a glaring Roth. "This is going too far. You're both supposed to be role models to this incoming class." Nathan's attempts fell on deaf ears as Roth looked over to Enos in question. "Fine. No abilities," was his clipped response as he turned on his heel and stepped in place on the mat. Enos gave one last tug on her muscles before they finally listened, allowing her to stand across from her opponent. "I'm sorry," she finally shot back to Nathan, having at least enough heart to feel guilty about what she had caused. "He's not going to hold back," was the response she got. "I know he's not, but neither am I. He was trained here in a controlled facility while I learned out there in the real world where your mistakes matter. Besides, you shared your hero wisdom with me. I'll be okay." She tried to placate with a joking tone. Nathan didn't reply, pulling his presence from her mind completely. Although it was meant to remove distraction, it almost felt hollow in a way, briefly leaving her lightheaded. He had been welcomed there for so long, it felt numbing now that he wasn't connected to her. She looked over to where he stood, the halfway point between the two, and breathed. After a count-in, Enos drew the top hero out of his corner on the mat. While they agreed to no abilities, it was almost impossible for Enos to comply completely. Unlike Roth and many of the other heroes, she didn't have an ability where she could turn off like a light switch. Her enhanced sight and hearing were always a part of her, whether she wanted them to be or not. She learned to mitigate it, but even that had its limitations. But Enos was no cheater, so she made do. Focusing in on the steady heartbeat of Nathan, she met Roth's cold eyes as he approached. His threat was clear, but it wouldn't be the first time that Enos had gone toe-to-toe with someone with more experience and better reputation than hers. In the moors, she started her vigilante gig at 16, Nathan at 17. With lower income rates and hardly any presence of the heroes, there was naturally high crime. Vigilantes before her had tried to help where the Federation lacked, but that didn't save them from being corrupt as well. His name was Fergus Hansen, a strength track vigilante that proved that fact. On the surface, he seemed like a savior to those deemed unworthy to be protected by the heroes and the Moors, but in turn, he was just as bad as any other criminal. He cut deals with certain crime groups, turning a coincidental blind eye to the harm they had caused. His vigilante reign was just a facade, another way to climb the chain of crime. Enos might have walked away from that fight with a broken arm and bloody nose, but she had walked away the winner. Roth was of no different stature, tall and refined, a cold look in his eyes that gave away his burning rage. He raised his arm, ready to punch, but Enos was always quicker. Rolling under his extended arm, she aimed a kick at the back of one of his knees. The older man stumbled, but quickly regained composure. "You're going to have to try a little harder than that to take me down, Eagle," he goaded. Like a switch, this was no longer Enos on the mat, bouncing on the balls of her feet to keep the momentum. This was the Eagle, the hard-torn vigilante that kept the Moors safe from those who thought they were better than their equals. "Don't worry, I'm just getting warmed up," she quipped back, releasing a series of jabs in his direction. They connected thoroughly on his body, but he was quick to retreat and recover. Enos took a step back, mindful of the border of out of bounds. She could feel her breathing getting heavier, so she focused on the constant drumming coming from Nathan. Slightly faster with anxiety, she looked up and met his eyes. His sights were trained on Roth, fingers tapping against his leg where he stood. Roth had recovered once more and aimed another strong punch in her direction. His knuckles clipped against the side of her jaw, undoubtedly causing a bruise to form already. He pulled away once, avoiding another kick that fell short. Instead of letting him retreat, Enos followed, landing a few hits of her own to leave him winded. The fight went on for what could have been ages or a few moments, hit for hit exchanged in equal measures. After an elbow to the neck, Enos had managed to get Roth onto his back, only propped up by his arms as he coughed from the hit. "Yield," she commanded, voice leaving no room for argument, but he found one anyway. Another flurry of hits were exchanged as the two reached their wits' end. This battle was more than proving a point. This was for the honor of both heroes and vigilantes. Neither would lose, not willingly anyway. The two met in the center of the mat, neither holding back now. Enos managed to kick a leg out, connecting with Roth's knee, which sent them both tumbling. In a mess of flying limbs, his fist managed to connect with her nose, blood splattering on the mat below. Neither of them waited long before jumping back to a flurry of punches. All the while, she kept a keen ear on Nathan's fast-paced heart in the background. It was a tether to remind her where she was. She wasn't back in the Moors, fighting Fergus Hansen in some dirty, dim-lit hallway. She was at the Federation headquarters, fighting against the top hero in the districts. As Roth went to stand to his full height, she wound up one final kick, managing with all of the force and momentum in her body. As her heel connected to his body, there was a sickening crack that she couldn't block out as Roth tumbled down and stayed there. "Match, the Eagle," Nathan said quietly. After he spoke, the three of them stood in silence, catching their breath. With each inhale Roth drug in, Enos could hear the amplified grinding of bones together. Broken ribs, then. Roth laid on the ground for a few moments more, hand placed over his broken bones. The only other sound besides the grinding in Nathan's beating heart was the quiet drip of blood from Enos's nose onto the mat. Her fingers brushed lightly against the tender skin. She concluded that it was most likely broken as well. Roth, with a heavy body, pushed himself into a standing position, meeting her eyes. "Get to medical. You two will continue training the students tomorrow," he huffed out, making his way out of the training room. Listening to his steps retreat, heading to his dorm, it sounded, Nathan joined her side. Gently, like she was made of glass, he guided her up by the chin to look at her head-on. A frown etched itself onto his face as he gently pressed against the bridge of her nose, drawing a hiss of pain. "Definitely broken," he murmured, beginning to lead her out of the training room with a hand on her lower back, heading to their shared dorm. They didn't speak again until they were securely locked in, Enos taking a seat on the bed with a rag pressed against the blood. She gave a wide, toothy grin as Nathan reappeared from the bathroom with a first aid kit. "I told you it would be fun to see him get humbled," she laughed. Instead of joining in with their usual banter, Nathan just sighed deeply and motioned for her to move the rag. "Don't laugh with half of your face covered in blood. It makes you look like a psychopath," he scolded, exasperated, prodding at the skin and preparing to reset it. "Relax, it's my blood, not someone else's. It's just a small price to pay for the bigger picture, Nathan. I know it doesn't seem like it now, but we're getting closer to our goal," she said, resting one of her hands on his arms. Nathan said nothing as he gently wiped away the rest of the blood from the lower half of her face. his brow furrowed as he leaned forward and rested his fingers against her nose in silent question. With a nod, he quickly snapped the cartilage back into place with a small grunt from Enos. Big picture or not, we shouldn't be putting our bodies on the line for it, Nathan retorted, adjusting the nasal splint on the bridge of her nose. Pressing the bandage to keep it in place, Nathan pulled away to study her face. I appreciate the concern, but you know I've had worse, she reminded kindly, leaning back onto the pillows with a small laugh. Nathan joined her, hand resting just inches away from hers while he looked up at the ceiling. Besides, putting our bodies on the line is in the job description. Maybe against villains, not our own. Our own. Unfortunately, Roth falls into the category of our allies, Nathan huffed. To erase the worried creases between his brows, Enos reached out and connected her hands together, rubbing her thumb over the calloused knuckles. Unfortunately indeed, she agreed, shutting her eyes and focusing in on Nathan's heart. It was more steady than it had been when they had left the training room, but once was a thunderous drumming for a pace far too fast to be resting. Now a quiet backbeat of what Enos had quickly claimed the sound of home. She couldn't quite pinpoint when the habit had started, but she had found that she was a lot calmer of a person now that it had developed. That's why I love him, she thought to herself, not minding the mental piece that clicked back into place for its displacement earlier. It was a rude awakening, the clattering sound that came from somewhere on the floor of the building. At 4 a.m, nonetheless, Enos peeled away from the comfort of their shared bed and quickly began to hunt down the noise that had woken her. Focusing on the sound, it was quickly followed by the familiar tune of being whistled. She once again found herself in the training room, dimly lit and empty, except for the janitor mopping up the dried blood on the floor. Pushing past the smell of chemicals that clung to her throat, she knocked lightly on the door frame to get his attention. His eyes briefly flashed up to meet hers, then looked back down to the task at hand. I should have known it was one of you creating extra work for me, he mocked. His bushy mustache twitched in a poorly concealed smile, causing Enos to return the gesture. Sorry, when I fight, I usually don't have to worry about a cleanup crew, she explained, crossing her arms and leaning more comfortably against the wall. The older man chuckled as he pushed the water back and forth across the plastic mat. Why are you awake? He asked, not unkindly. He turned his attention back to his cleaning cart, securing a lid onto one of the chemicals he had been using to clean the mat. I could hear that bottle you dropped, she answered, nodding to where his hand paused on the product. He huffed at a laugh, looking at least apologetic as he grabbed his mop to continue working on the blood splatters. Just try earplugs. They work wonders for those in the perception track, I've heard. Not for me, my ears are still too sensitive. That's tough luck, he said, lapping back into silence as he went back to his cart. His voice lacked sympathy, but it wasn't cruel either, just factual. Are you in a track? Enos pondered. She was met with a scoff, the man shooting her a bitter smile. If I was, I wouldn't be cleaning up you and your hero's messes, he shot back, dunking the mop back into its bucket and grabbing a spray bottle filled with some pungent cleaning chemical. Is there anything I can help you with? Enos asked again quietly. He looked up at Enos before shaking his head. No can do, hero, he sighed, kneeling down to where the dark stain of blood once laid on the mat. I'm not a hero, she retorted in instinct, second nature getting the best of her once again. Didn't I tell you that your humble act gets a little old after a while? He shot back. She laughed at him, offering her hand to help him stand. His knees cracked and popped as he returned to full height, a telltale sign of aging. I forgot to ask your name. Believe me, you are not the first. What is it? She inquired, taking a step away as he turned back to his cart of supplies. Clyde Burton, he said with a faint trace of bitterness that only an old man could carry. Enos Wake, she introduced, despite being sure that he already knew, but it only felt right to stand on equal ground. She wasn't a mind reader like Nathan, but she could understand that his huff of laughter meant he was thinking it was a little redundant. If I were you, I'd be running off to get my beauty rest, hero or not. It looks like you need it more now than ever, he teased, already heading back out of the room before she could think of a retort. She couldn't help but snicker into the empty training room, turning to head back to Nathan's dorm.